The Zohar uses this to actually show you two very important things. That it's not just that a shmendrik gets to argue with God. It could be that in certain situations, the soul of that tzaddik, in the case of Moshe and Moses, is attached to a spiritual level that would make him, because of his relationship with that level of his attachment, higher than, let's say, the Shekhinah, what we call the divine presence. And therefore able to argue or speak to the Shekhinah in a way that a man might speak to his wife. Not today, but back in the day. So the story is that Moshe tries to fulfill his mission. Somebody, do you mind? I know Rafi, you know it by heart, but I don't. The Chumash. Rafi's a Balkar, so he knows it cold, but I don't. So thank you. I still need to. The old-fashioned way for me. So what happens is Moshe goes on this mission to tell Pharaoh to let his people go, and it's a disaster. In that not only does Pharaoh does not respond well to Moses, he says, "Nir b'matan, you're thinking of freedom because the people are lazy. We're not working them hard enough, so they're getting distracted in their lack of diligence to the cause, and they're thinking about silly things like freedom. So what I'm going to do," Pharaoh says, "is from now I'm going to stop providing the straw that would serve as the base for the mortar that the Jews would need to have a specific quota of bricks." So who gets the stress? The every Jew who's oppressed, but in particular the ones who are appointed. The task, there were intermediaries. There were Jewish people who were in charge of. They were in between the Egyptians who were beating the Jews if they didn't bring in their quota. They were trying to encourage the Jews, and they were the ones who would get beaten the first when the quota wouldn't be met. And they said, "Moses, you think you did us a favor? From when you came to speak to Pharaoh, he says we smell bad. The scent of us is abhorrent in his eyes. And God should judge you." It's as if, "For you have made our very scent abhorrent in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of his servants, to place a sword in their hands to murder us." You're basically, big help you are. So Moses goes back to God, and he complains. "Why have you done bad to this people? Lama harei salam hazeh. Why haven't you sent them free? And from when I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, you've been more difficult and challenging, and terrible things have happened to these people. You didn't save them." So God says to Moses, "You'll see what I'm going to do to Pharaoh, because with a strong hand I'm going to send them out, and with a strong hand I'll drive them out of the land." Now, this is a very beautiful section. Finally, somebody's standing up to God. It's part of our tradition. Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof, arguing, not just taking things, but this is a beautiful opportunity for the Zohar to say, how could Moses give God a hard time? I mean, doesn't he know that God knows? Doesn't he know that God sees the bigger picture? Doesn't he know what God will show him, that eventually it's going to happen the way God said it would? Instead he says, "God, why are you doing this?" But what's even more interesting is if that's the end of Shemos. The beginning of Va'era is just a continuation of that, the parsha is really like stops right in the middle. You really want to know what's going on after Shemos, so you make sure you're there in Parshas Va'era, because you better find out what's God going to answer. I mean, he started the answer, but is that it? So then Parshas Va'era, Yidaber Elokim el Moshe v'Yomer Lo Ani Hashem. So again, what is the Zohar about? One of the things it's all about is the different names of God are very significant. Each name of God conveys a particular aspect of the divine, which will then be described in terms of the Sfirot and the Olamot, but each name of God is essentially in some type of relationship with the other name. Interdivine communication. Perfect verse. V'yidaber Elokim el Moshe. Elokim, which is one of the names of God we usually associate with justice, speaks to Moses. V'yomer Eilav ani Yudke Vavke, ani Hashem. And he says to him, I am this other name of God, which is usually associated with Tiferet, with compassion. So it's like, okay, maybe it means the God of justice says, I'm also the God. We're really the same. And Moshe's in the middle. It's a three-way interdivine. Moshe's soul, the level of Akim, the level of Hashem, the Era el Avram el Yitzchak el Yaakov. It introduces yet a third name, Kel Shaddai. A third name of God. I appeared to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, with this name, Kel Shaddai. Ushmi Avaya, Shmi Hashem lo nodai to them, but I didn't let them know this name. It's a more transcendent name. Okay. The Zohar says the following. Imagine there was once a king and his daughter, the princess. The king only speaks to people through the princess. The king is a friend. The friend marries the daughter. Who's the daughter? The daughter is the Shechina. Who's the friend of the king who marries the princess? Moshe. Moshe then gets into a fight with his wife, the Shechina. He speaks down to her. Maybe he raises his voice a little bit. Maybe he's angry. Maybe he gives her a hard time. Into this disagreement between Moshe and his wife comes the higher level of God, the Father, which is considered like the father of the Shechina, and says, it comes from me. Even your power, Moshe, is because Moshe is connected to Tiferes, is connected to the higher attributes. That's from God. God says all your power comes. I gave it to you because I wanted you to be able to marry my daughter, but I can take it away from you. So she's my daughter. You have your strength. You're the son-in-law of the king because of her and through her. So be careful how you speak to her. Just like the king would say, I know you're her husband, but she's also my daughter, and I'm the king. So remember who's. So it's like Moshe is pulling like I'm the husband, and then God's saying, well, I'm the king, and I'm the father of the princess. So that's how the Zohar reads this. The Zohar reads a lot more into that, but the idea of what I'm trying to convey here is that there's a divine dialogue going on, and Moshe's smack in the middle of it.
Is that Kuchek when we say?
Yeah. And that's the main theme of the Zohar, is about the masculine and feminine aspects of God coming together. But how that works is the whole story of the entire Torah. There's more than just those two aspects, but they're the highlight of the interdivine communication. Is the masculine aspect, which we call Kuchabricha or Tiferes, which is more transcendent, and the feminine, which we call the Shechina, which is immanent, which is that which, the Shechina is that which dwells. So now, all of a sudden, what is the story? What is the medrash of the Zohar? It's to show you how each verse in the Torah is really a story of a relationship between the variety of God's names and how they're interlinked and communicating and relating. One of them is maybe becoming more dominant, one of them is giving, one of them is receiving, one of them is going up, one of them is going down. But it's not just, as will eventually become, like a systematic kind of scientific study. The Zohar is medrash. It's full of metaphors and allegories. It doesn't use the same word again and again and again from its Sephirotic repertoire. It's sparse in its use of those terms. Instead, it has new terms and terms of just referencing different biblical words and verses to create a more lush tapestry that doesn't look like you're trying to do accounting. That's the beauty of the Zohar. The beauty of the Zohar is, even though there's a system, the system is hidden behind the great beauty of words. Let's look at the Zohar in Parshas Vayetze. Actually, Vayishlach. I'm sorry, we're doing Parshas Vayishlach. Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim. Jacob sent messengers.